Hi everyone, thanks for coming today. So I am Grace. I'm a second year PhD student at the University of Birmingham. And today I'm just going to give a talk about co-production with older adults and using a citizen science approach to build active aging interventions, which is part of my research at the University of Birmingham. So today I'm just going to provide a kind of overview of co-production practices, discuss the Our Voice citizen science framework that we're using, talk about the Active Ageing project in Birmingham that we're currently undertaking, and then talk about the benefits of using co-production in interventions. So just to start with, and to kind of give an overview of the differences between traditional practices and co-production practices. So in traditional practices, individuals who are engaged in the research are described as participants, and they're engaged in the research to provide data and information as part of the study. And then the sort of strategies and solutions that are generated throughout the research processes are directed solely by researchers. And these individuals are kind of seen as subjects of the research. But in comparison with co-production practices, citizens who engage in the research are called citizen scientists, or they're seen as co-researchers. They're actively engaged throughout the entire research process and not just to provide data and information. The sort of strategies and solutions that are generated throughout the research are generated and steered by citizens and co-researchers. And there's also a clear partnership between citizen scientists and researchers throughout the process. Just so there's kind of like equal balance between the two throughout the processes. So in my research, we look at three types of citizen science co-production. So the first is called For the People. So this is more of a contributory approach, citizen science, where citizens have limited engagement and are only there to kind of provide the data rather than collect the data. So it's very similar to traditional processes. All the research processes are directed solely by the researchers without input from citizens. So an example of this is through sort of like passive data collection, where you are provided with a kind of predetermined questionnaire and citizens just provide answers to this questionnaire. The second type of citizen science is called By the People. This is more of a collaborative approach where citizens actively engage in collecting the data. So this is where the whole research process is driven by researchers, but citizens actively collect data rather than do a passive style of data collection. So an example of this is where citizens will sign up to a website and engage in discussions and sharing information about things such as like their health conditions. And this is used to actively collect data, but then this data is taken and disseminated without input from citizens. And then lastly is With the People, which is a type of citizen science that we use in my research. So this is a co-production approach. And this is where citizens are actively engaged throughout each stage of the research process to kind of steer the research and its focus. And there's an active collaboration or partnership between citizens and researchers. So an example of this, which I'll talk about shortly, is the Our Voice framework, which we use, which is where it's a 4-step framework where it facilitates co-production with citizens at each stage of the research process to incorporate their kind of experiences and needs. So just to show this as sort of a visual representation, we have 4 stages of the research project. So we have the development of the project, we have the collection of data, we then have the analysis of the data and findings, and then the dissemination and sharing of findings. So with the For the People citizen science, citizens are only engaged in providing passive data collection. The With the People type of citizen science is as an active data collection where citizens are actively involved in this stage, but no other stages. And then lastly, there's the By the People approach, where citizens are engaged in developing the focus of the project through discussions and deciding on sort of where the project should go. Then there's active data collection from citizens. Then citizens are engaged in the analysis and member check in this stage. And then the citizens will then determine the priorities based on the analysis and findings, and also the dissemination in terms of who the findings should be shared with, and how and when they should be shared. So the By the People citizen science is used in the Our Voice Global Network, which is a citizen science global network developed at Stanford University. So this global network uses a By the People citizen science approach in projects across the globe. And these projects look at things such as community environment. So these projects have used citizen science to evaluate neighbourhood environments, look at healthier communities, and also look at improving walking routes. They've used it in active living and food access. So they've looked at evaluating urban pop-up parks and the impact of this on health and active living. They promote active living, and they also look at how to produce healthier food environments. And then they also use technology-enabled citizen science. So they have this thing called the Discovery Tool application, which is put onto like a mobile device such as a phone or an iPad, and they use it to basically produce community-driven citizen science, where the technology is used to empower residents to collect data and to use this to create community change based on the data that they've collected. So the actual framework itself that uses the By the People approach is done in 4 steps. So the first step is called Discover. So this is where citizens will discover aspects of their local community that impact their ability to be healthy or active. And this is done using the digital application called the Discovery Tool. And citizens will walk around their local area looking at features and facilities and things that impact their ability to be healthy, and document this by collecting data through the Discovery Tool application. The second stage is Discuss. So you take the findings from the first stage and you have open discussions with citizen scientists to understand what the kind of barriers and facilitators are to their healthy living, and use this to discuss and prioritise target areas for change, so to co-produce kind of action points with citizens for change. The third stage is Advocate. So this is where you then take the kind of target areas that you have, the priorities that have been co-produced with citizens, and have a meeting with stakeholders, local community members and decision makers, where citizens can kind of advocate and present their action points, and share these with these individuals to kind of co-produce overall workable changes that can be used in local areas. And then lastly is Change. So this is where these workable changes are then implemented within the community to kind of improve healthy living. And this is kind of followed with sort of long-term tracking of these kind of workable changes to see what has happened and how these have been implemented. So to kind of provide an overview of what we're doing an active ageing project in Birmingham called Improving Your Local Area. So the aim of this project is to engage local citizens who are older adults aged 60 or above, stakeholders, decision makers and local community members in Birmingham to understand how the urban environments in Birmingham influence an older adult's ability to be active and healthy. And we're going to use this to identify these features and then use these to co-produce actions, solutions and advocate change in local urban environments for older adults. So the way we do this is we use the By the People co-production to identify the urban characteristics that act as facilitators or barriers to active ageing. And then what we do is we take these facilitators and barriers and use them to co-produce action points that can then improve the living environments for older adults. And this is an example of a recruitment poster that we sent out for the project at the start. And it shows how older adults are engaged in the By the People citizen science in the 4 different stages of Discover, Discuss, Advocate and Change. So currently we have 18 older adults aged 60 or above across Birmingham engaged in the project from different wards. And then we also have local members from different community organisations and decision makers from Birmingham City Council, Ageing Better, Sustrans, Thrive Together Birmingham, and all these individuals are engaged in the project. So currently we're at stage 1, Discover, which has been delayed due to COVID. But at the moment, we have facilitated 4 Discover Together online discussion groups with 17 older adults. and 2 Discover Together online discussion groups with 12 members from community organisations. So these were originally meant to be in person, but then moved online due to COVID. And these discussion groups kind of looked at the main kind of barriers and facilitators in these individuals' local areas that influence their ability to be active and healthy. We then took the audio transcript from these sessions and did a thematic analysis to basically pull out the key themes for each area. So to look at the key barriers and the key facilitators that were discussed. And then these diagrams that we created from this have been shared with both the citizens and the experts to be checked. And there's member checking at each stage of the audio transcripts and any data analysis. So just to provide a quick overview of some sort of facilitation barriers, community facilities and support was both seen as a barrier and a facilitator for one of the groups. So for example, the barriers for community facilities were lack of age-friendly access, lack of suitable venues, or things such as cost of activities being too high. But then on the facilitator for community facilities and support were things like allotments, which were shown to increase social and physical activity, and also things such as age inclusive and accessible activities that all different age groups could attend. And then during this stage, we're currently waiting to go ahead with this, but we'll then start with the Discovery Tool walk, where we'll go on a walk in older adults, sort of local areas that are meaningful to them, and using the Discovery Tool application, we'll go around and they'll collect data on things in their local area that influence them. So then we'll move on to the second stage, which is discuss. So we take all the findings from the first stage from the discussion group and the Discovery Tool findings, and we'll use this to facilitate a discussion with citizen scientists to understand the sort of key action points that can be co-produced together, and solutions and priorities for local areas that can be produced to create sort of action points. And this is an example of an Our Voice project that has taken place in Australia. But what we'll do is we'll take the audio transcript and we'll have it member checked again, and then we'll use this to analyse the data to basically produce some action points. And then after this, we'll use this to co-produce the action points with members by having them member check these points. And at the end of this stage, we'll then have a set of kind of workable changes that have been co-produced and can be shared with local decision makers. So once we finish these 2 stages, we'll then move on to the advocate stage. So what we'll have then is we're planning to put on a workshop with local community members from the different organisations involved, such as Birmingham City Council, Ageing Better, and this will be an opportunity to have a kind of open discussion between citizens and these individuals on how to kind of produce some workable changes and action points, which citizens can then advocate to these individuals. So what it'll do is produce a set of action points that citizens have prioritised and have shared with these decision makers to kind of produce workable actions that can be shared. And then after that, we'll go to the change stage. So this is where we'll share these kind of workable action points with the decision makers and with citizens to be implemented to basically improve local areas in Birmingham. So just to provide an overview of how we're engaging citizen scientists throughout the entire research process, citizens guide the discussion groups and the chosen topics. So the online discussion groups and all discussion groups we have are facilitated by either 3 open-ended questions about barriers, facilitators and priorities, or they're based on the kind of data that's been collected by citizens previously. But the citizens basically guide the discussion group and the chosen topics with little input from researchers. So these groups are based on what citizens want to talk about in terms of their local area and the barriers and the facilitators present. Citizens will direct the Discovery Tool walk in a meaningful location. So these Discovery Tool walks where citizens will collect data take place in a meaningful location to these individuals that they may spend time in every day. We have citizens member check the data analysis at each stage. So the audio transcripts, any data we collect, any recommendations we co-produce, it's all checked by citizens and by those involved in the research process. And then in the advocate stage, we have citizens engaged to present and co-present these recommendations that have been co-produced. So it provides the opportunity to have a discussion for citizens, to have a discussion with experts to then basically advocate the recommendations that they've produced. So just to provide a benefits of co-production, a kind of overview. So the outcomes incorporate the needs, views and priorities of citizens. So using this kind of by the people co-production approach will incorporate the kind of needs and views of the older adults engaged in the project. So it'll be things that are important to them that influence their ability to be healthy and active. So the outcomes at the end will be relevant to end users. It engages and strengthens citizens' involvement in scientific research. So it kind of builds a stronger relationship between citizens and researchers, especially for this project at the University of Birmingham, to then strengthen this relationship, which can then lead to further research and further involvement of citizens in projects. It increases citizen knowledge, understanding and awareness of both scientific processes and about their local area. And it also increases the knowledge of scientists in terms of things that we would not be able to find out without having this kind of experience from citizens provided. Citizens are empowered to continue to collaborate and engage in local issues. So citizens in previous Our Voice projects have gone on to continue in civic engagement, to continue in different projects, and have done things such as creating walking groups in the local area. And lastly, it kind of develops trust and transparency between science and citizens. So as citizens are engaged in each stage of the research process, it's completely transparent. They understand where the outcomes have come from, and these kind of workable action points are then created, co-produced together, and it's completely transparent, the whole process. Okay, so thanks for listening. Yeah, I'll just stop this now. Questions? Does anybody have any questions? Hi, Helen.
Yeah, my question was about the charges, you know, because it looks great that there's an app and there's obviously that framework that's been developed at Stanford or wherever. Are there any charges for sort of using the framework? Any charges associated with the app?
No, not as far as I'm aware, there's no charges, but I think it's in development, so it has to be used through research.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes. Grace is correct. Hello, my name is Afroditi Stathi, and I'm one of the supervisors of Grace's work. So, very good question about the Discovery Tool app. The application is used cost-free for research purposes. So, for the work we do with Grace, it's without cost, but obviously if for other projects or for applications in big community works, then there is a cost because of all the maintenance of the application and the complexity and superiority of this application. Yes. However, the framework as such is cost-free. So we have a close collaboration with the Stanford team who have developed this framework and the application. And using the framework is free, and the application for Grace's research.
It's just interesting, isn't it? You know, because when you talk about citizen science, but actually, if it becomes a tool that continues to, I know, appreciate this development costs and stuff, but if it continues to be a tool or an app that's held within the research community, it then, you know, it's not, you know, it's, yeah. You know, if you were another community group, I suppose, or a community organisation, I work in housing, in a local housing association. If we wanted to do something, I guess we'd have to hook up with a, you know, a university, you know, and it's just, yeah, I do appreciate this cost in this sort of.
That's a very good point, and I have thought a lot about this. What do we do in the future, or when projects are not longer attached to a research? There are applications available which do some of the things that the Our Voice application does, and they are free to use. So when things develop and we go down that road that we want to engage more people outside the strict research phase that we do, there are solutions on that. It might not be so sophisticated, but for the kind of work we want to do and use the application to facilitate the process, there are already things out there that we can use for free.
Well, thank you.
Hiya.
Hi, my name's Maria. I work for Birmingham LGBT and I work as part of Aging Better in Birmingham. I'm really fascinated by this as someone who's done research work myself in the past and monitoring and evaluation. One of the things that it strikes me as a benefit that you didn't mention is when the research participant is asked to take part in the research under other circumstances quite often, and this has been asked of me, it's like, well, what happens to this research? What are you going to do with it? Or,
Yeah.
oh, I've done questionnaires before and nothing seems to have changed and I don't see what the point is. And I think taking this approach, you've actually, people are being approached by people who do know what the point is because they've been part of deciding what the point is.
Yeah.
That they're actually of the community that they are researching as opposed to being outside of it. So I could see it would feel less like someone just trying to ask you a load of nosy questions and not really knowing, you know, what's
Where it's
happen,
going.
and just feeling sometimes, you know, people's expectations get raised, don't they, by research. So I think, oh, well, we've told them what we want and now we're going to get it, and then they don't get it. So I think if it, you know, I could really see how just that whole approach would make the people who are being asked the questions more likely to want to do that, and as you say, quite possibly get involved themselves. You know, I guess if you're being asked the questions and you see who's asking them and how they do that, you might say, how did you get into this? How did you become a citizen researcher? How can I become one? So
Yeah.
I think that strikes me as like, you know, a real benefit to that. But I do, you know, we sometimes have to do surveys ourselves, and quite often I'm asked, will I promote surveys from other students in our newsletter and things like that? And just know with the best will in the world, people are just going to look at them and go, oh, I can't be bothered. But this approach, I think, would make a real difference to that kind of attitude of research fatigue, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a very good point, and it also kind of makes people feel responsible as well for the kind of changes that they're doing. And I think engaging citizens in this way as it's also just as important to engage the kind of community members as well, because the responsibility is on them to make these changes as well. And I think if they're involved in the whole process, then they have a responsibility, and it does kind of connect this whole process together so people can see where it's all come from. So definitely, yeah.
And just to add to Grace's comment, thank you, Maria. This is a really valid point, and we need we have discussed that with Grace. We need to stress more the impact of this approach. So at the end of the day, what we want to get out of this research is some real changes in Birmingham. So people will highlight what the issues are, and then collectively we'll think about how things can be resolved, who needs to be engaged, who needs to be part of the solution, and then further down the line to see these changes happening. Also for us as researchers, this is so rewarding, because it does take long time for research to translate to practice, and this kind of approaches gives us this benefit to feel that we are part of the process of changing. So what I've done is, in the chat, I have put the link to the Stanford webpage, where in your own time you can see examples of practices throughout the world that the Stanford team has either led or collaborated, as they do with us for Grace's project, and you can see how the process has led to real differences. Just to give you a flavor of things that have happened elsewhere. Thank you.
Is there any other questions? I think we're kind of towards the end of the time anyway, but if I can, I'll put my email in the chat anyway. So it'd be good to speak to you all anyway, and we can all connect, put that in there. But yeah, it'd be great, and thank you all for coming and listening. I really appreciate it.